So again, the invention of the steam engine led to the advent of railroads. Telegraph wires were strung along railroads, giving natural right of way to get those wires through. And the invention of the telegraph also meant that the first transatlantic cable was laid in 1866. So all of a sudden, news from Europe was almost instantaneous. And you can see how the growth of newspapers was phenomenal, to 7,000 in 1880. Steam also powered printing presses, enabling more pages and etc. The invention of photography also helped make newspapers' content more interesting and vital for people. And then you can see here even a school of journalism at the University of Missouri in 1904. And the University of Missouri still has an excellent school of journalism, by the way. Okay, so steam engine, bigger printing presses, bigger quantities of newspapers, and train tracks for wires to be strung. When Abraham Lincoln won the nomination, Republican Party nomination, it was actually pretty much a brand new party at that point. They were a party that was pro-abolition. The Democratic Party was anti-abolition and more pro-Southern. But when Lincoln actually ran for the presidency, he did not spend any money on advertising. In fact, he didn't even campaign or appear in public to give speeches. He would send letters to the editor. Many times it was Horace Greeley, who was the editor, publisher of the New York Herald Tribune, a very influential abolitionist here in New York. And Lincoln's letters, which he wrote to clarify his positions on certain things, would first be published in the Herald Tribune, and then they would spread out and be published in newspapers all across the country. So the whole country could read what Lincoln said. That was his form of Twitter, I guess you could say. A lot longer, more words, but took a little longer to get the word out, but it got the word out. And newspapers, obviously important for news about the Civil War. And we talked about the inclusion of photography and images, real images in newspapers. That's James K. Polk was the first president of the United States to be photographed, and there he is in 1849, just before the Civil War, which took place in 1860 to 1865, in case you didn't know that. And Civil War casualties, they were photographers, including Matthew Brady, who traveled with the Union Army and took pictures after the battles. He wasn't out taking a lot of photographs during the battles. That was not a smart place to be, but did after the battles. And these kinds of pictures occasionally may have run in some newspapers. Jumping forward to 1914, this was what started, ostensibly, the spark that started World War I. Heir to Austria's throne slain by a Bosnian youth. Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his consort were shot. There it is in the New York Times. I read the news today, oh boy. So, advertising ran even in the earliest colonial papers. Here's an ad that actually ran just the way I showed you a poster that ran in England for the Virginia colony recruiting folks. Here's a ad that ran in the UK for the sailing of the Titanic. Yep. Here's another ad that ran in newspaper. You see, it's black and white. There's no color in the newspapers for till the 20th century, really. This one is not four-color printing. This is Coca-Cola ad that ran in a newspaper. And you can see it's actually a coupon. It was a card. It was distributed in newspaper, separately printed from the newspaper, printed by Coca-Cola. Probably the peak of newspapers' influence as the national, city by city, but nevertheless a national means of communication was yellow journalism. These are the two men who were kind of rivals at that point. I'm going to come back to them in a second. Phrase yellow journalism was coined in the 1890s. And there was furious competition between the World and the Journal. Joseph Pulitzer had the World. He used colorful, sensational reporting, crusades against corruption and social injustice, had the largest newspaper circulation in the country. And in 1895, William Randolph Hearst moved to New York City and bought the rival Journal and wanted to outdo his competitor in sensationalism, etc. And this promoted large circulations for both papers and affected American journalism in many cities. Ended shortly after the turn of the century. So just to go back for a second, these are the two titans of newspapers, and their names carry forward today, both of them, in different ways. A little more on Hearst. This was his California home, San Simeon. I mean, he was a very wealthy man. And this home above the ocean, Pacific Ocean in California, he entertained lavishly. He imported all kinds of works of art, and furniture, and all kinds of things, statuary from Europe, and entertained, as I say, lavishly. This was his mistress, Marion Davies, actually a very good actress. Not really always given the credit for that. And the two of them entertained lavishly, as I said. And their life together was, I guess you could say, satirized by one of the best films, American films of all time, called Citizen Kane. And I'm going to include we're going to break now. There's going to be a little clip of Citizen Kane where the man who co-wrote Citizen Kane, but also directed and starred in Citizen Kane, playing someone like William Randolph Hearst, is Orson Welles. And Orson Welles, we saw, I think, 2 lectures ago in War of the Worlds when he was 23. You recall he produced this radio program that about a Martian invasion that scared the heck out of people. And one of the reasons he did it was because of concern over fake news. He wanted to kind of show how far it could go, fake news, and what effect it might have. And he did Citizen Kane when he came to Hollywood. I think he was 26 or 27, I believe, when he did this, which is like a brilliant, brilliant film, making fun of Hearst and infuriating Hearst. Hearst tried to stop the film from coming out, but he wasn't able to. So, going to take a break, and you'll see a little bit of Citizen Kane.